even just two cars passing each other create an electromagnetic field. But people started to learn about these fields, as you said, the economy of the world, okay, in rare earth materials for one entire year is in one of those asteroids in rare earth materials. What materials can you make in zero gravity and zero atmosphere and pharmaceuticals? The interesting things you can do up there, they're doing right now, and then bringing them back down. What's that worth? That's the real game.
Friends, it seems like big government, tech giants, and unelected oligarchs are trying to destroy America. And you can see the supply chain disintegrating across the planet. And one of these things that's going to fail along with that will be the food supply chain. Do you have enough emergency food? Most people don't, and they'll panic when the time comes. And give yourself the peace of mind knowing that you have storable foods. 20+ year shelf life allows you to make wise choices, be able to stay home, avoid the chaos. So head on over to foodwithadapt2030.com and see what else My Patriot Supply has to keep your family's grand solar minimum prepared. And now on with the video. Good afternoon, everyone. I know from popular request a million billion times, Tom Ross from Tesnic.com rejoins me. We're going to talk about the future, electricity, how electromagnetic currents might be flowing, how this will affect the human perception, things to look for in 2022, 23 with hydrogen coming out. And there's an enormous amount of movement now to new energy, and it's just starting to make it electrogravitics motors, things that are talked about the future, the hydrogen economy, deliverable power down lines that we understand, but at the source. And that goes with using the Earth's magnetic field or separating gases that are in our atmosphere. He was the one who sent me the link to Prometheus fuels that I talked about, using the anode and the cathode and a different electrical charge to reassemble atoms into either a liquid or take a gas, break it apart, use something called CO2, disassemble those atoms and then recombine them into like CH4, and then you could burn it again. Anything that they could do with the air, they could reconstitute it, and then almost you become an alchemical wizard by using electricity between two plates and different charges to reassemble matter itself. This is where we're going with the conversation tonight, so buckle up. Tom, thanks for joining me again.
Hey, David. Yeah, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate this opportunity, and your group has been so positive and so nice, and the interaction's been so amazing. So there's lots of people that have lots of listeners, but at the end of the day, we've had zero haters or zero people. They were all positive and forward moving, want to help and everything. So I must admit, somehow you're giving off all the right vibes.
I'm glad you said that. It is all about the vibration changing now, with the sun stepping down in its 400-year cycle. But what I'm finding, in addition to people behaving differently because they're perceiving reality different, that's something in a subset to talk about. But I'm finding that like-minded people and like-minded communities, individuals, thought processes are seemingly binding themselves together. People are coming out of the woodwork and they seem like perfect fits. It's like that. And it does seem that people are coagulating along energetic lines. Maybe it's a survival mechanism from millions of years to bring us together, those of like minds, because there won't be as much infighting in a community, for example, to grow food or do tasks or be able to share expertise. But yeah, it is all about the vibration right now, the change.
Yeah, well, my daughter says all these thieves wearing these masks are stealing everybody's happiness.
Oh, you're too deep. No, that hurts. That hurts.
So
Let me say that all these thieves wearing all these masks is stealing everybody's happiness from our planet.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. What if you were trying to create that energy frequency and that energy resonance so something slightly out of visual perception could feed on that? I'm just going there. I'm just going to start the interview off kind of just jumping in the deep end. Could be, but really, we do want to talk about science. But really, it is about vibration, things talked about through time immemorial, and there seems to be a lot of nesting in circles of time right now again.
Well, any adult like me gets lazy with, an 8-year-old. I just said, don't ask me, ask Google. She goes, hey, Google. And she asked the questions. She goes, how come it gives me different answers? I said, maybe you should look at the source. And maybe you should, some critical thinking, self-directed learning. Check it out. What's the best school in the world? What's this all about? So now she says, hey, Google, all day long. So now she's like, what's with this? The mask makes sure you don't have any oxygen. So these people are oxygen deprived. Well, let's look at how do people behave if they're oxygen deprived and they have carbon dioxide poisoning.
Sluggish and whatnot. And by the way, when you said whatever Google, you just trigger everybody's Google device in all the houses listening to our talk right here, didn't you?
Well, she says, hey, Google, but
you just triggered it again.
Well, okay, I'll do what the kids say at the school, like Mr. Gugu, Mr. Google, Mr. Gugu. The bottom line is it's on a VPN, the which she's using, and kids are brand. She wants a Tesla. I'm not really into Teslas. Out of contrast comes clarity, right? Why did you need that toy?
Well, let me interject there. See, maybe that's the way forward, is saying, no, you can't have that. You can't have a new Tesla. You need to build your own anti-gravity craft using the Earth's magnetic field and two oppositional spinning disks to get from A to B. Now go do that. What kind of Radio Shack would that require, do you think?
She's just been in some of the friends' parents' Teslas. So we're just getting a Tesla. We're going to put a V8 in it, like Rich rebuilds. We're going to put hydrogen on it with some electric motors. So it's basically a hydrogen electric hybrid that has that sweet sound of a carbureted big block in it. And that sound, from what I remember back in the old days, is like the sound of a carburetor opening up in the 4 barrels. But knowing your emissions because of the hydrogen are less than an electric vehicle, which is ironic, but you still have that visceral, with a transmission that you can shift gears and stuff. I guess it depends on where you come from, what age, but I think that's just the best of both worlds. You can save the world and have fun doing it at the same time. And then, rocking up next to somebody like Rich Rebuilds does, you're sitting there and you're just going, roar, and the whole car is rocking back and forth. That's just hilarious.
But do you have a license from Tesla to do such a thing, Tom? You owe us royalties. We're going to charge you a non-usage fee for doing that, by the way.
I can't take it to you, Mr. Tesla, Elon, for you to service, and I have to take it hours away on a flatbed. Sorry about that. I can fill it up in 3 minutes. Sorry about that. But it has less emissions, cradle to grave, and costs a lot less, is a lot more convenient than the original Tesla. That's why he put a Chevy engine into the thing, because at the end of the day, it was just like, if you want a Tesla, you can have your cake and eat it too. Throw some hydrogen on it, and the emissions coming out the tailpipe is water.
Water vapor, no less. Another cloud builder. Are we going into rainier times? No, it won't, because it'll be recycled back into the system and broken down. Much like methane, after 7 years or even 10 years at higher altitudes, it changes and those molecular bonds break down. And, that whole sink thing about the CO2 in the atmosphere, once you reach that plateau, even if you stop doing it, it would take 1,000 years for the first CO2 to come out of the atmosphere, even if we quit anything today. So you wouldn't see any possible changes for 1,000 years. That's truly based on the science. Like once CO2 is up there, it gets this plateau and it doesn't reduce or diminish itself in the atmosphere in concentration for at least 1,000 years. But you're looking at methane, which is now the boogeyman. And why is it the boogeyman? Why is it gas that combusts the negative thing now? But then that whole methane conundrum that they're trying to demonize what you're talking about, hydrogen, because methane is comprised of those hydrogen atoms. It all fits in the same vein where you can see some pushback already coming. They started with a cow. They started with a methane. When are they going to go? Oh, Tom, you can't split anything and burn it. You're going to put water vapor in the atmosphere. You're going to have more clouds and you're going to cause the record floods, my man. You're to blame for you and your water vapor dreams.
Well, you can always pee in the car. It'll recycle the water, and you can drink that when you're finished coming out the tailpipe if you want to have a circular system. There you go.
What are you going to do, man? How are you going to keep that clean? There's so much debris coming off these asphalt roads made out of the bitumen and the heavy tar and heavy densest of molecules in a barrel of oil.
Well, it's like on the International Space Station, everybody in space, they have pisponics, and they also recycle their urine, and the urine gets used as drinking water. So this is not something new.
Well, the solutions, in earnest, we see all these problems coming up, and we know that there has to be new power generation mechanisms or devices, because the lines, you're already seeing there's an enormous amount of things that are disrupting what had been built out over the last 100, 150 years. I don't care if it's sea routes or ports or electrical grids. It all seems to be across the planet disassembling itself, where there's breaks all the time, noticeable enough to make national or international news. So the old way of doing things, of bringing something to your home from a super, super far distance, that's not going to work anymore. And it doesn't matter whether it's a ship from China bringing goods over here, or if it's oil not coming from a pipeline because Biden closed pipelines. Now we need to bring it by ship again from the Middle East, or if it's the electricity coming to your home. I should say the magnetic field wrapped around the wire to deliver the electrons to your home. It all needs to change. In addition to us thinking about where on this planet is a safe place to be now, because you can look at the trajectory of where they're not allowing people to buy food at the moment if they're not vaccinated. And the list continues to grow, from Newfoundland and Canada, or New Brunswick, over to Germany, Austria, Poland, Lithuania, Australia. But where are areas in the world where you can kind of move to the future, where people are experimenting, thinking about new power devices, whether it's electric gravitics, hydrogen economy, and getting away from the mining and everything that we need to do to bring us the supposed solution of carbon fiber blades, etc. If we could just jump past all the inefficiencies already, if you see where the future is truly going. But again, we all need to grow food. We all need to eat. I've been working on a video tonight about fertilizer prices and the fertilizer food ratio price. So at the global minimum across the entire planet, food has risen 25% last year. That's for everybody. So I would ask you again, this next year is going to be an exponential increase in that. It should go up to probably 50 to 75, and a lot, not all, but many will be doubling food prices. So how long can a person and their family continue to take these never-ending price rises with the energy following directly behind that? Because the energy and the food are intertwined, the fertilizer and the energy are intertwined. But I want to hit the escape button and get out somewhere. I'm tired of it.
But anyway, but you're right. Not being connected to the sewer, the electricity wires, and all of that, water pipes and sewer, because those frequencies of people dealing with the situation in life right now, whether it's a text message or a video phone call or whatever it is, however they're expressing themselves in their field and their energy, the toroidal event, it's getting caught up in that, and then it's being amplified, and it goes through all that infrastructure. You feel it. It weighs you down. We're not connected to that. This is nirvana. This is heaven on earth. This is the way it's supposed to be. And getting a taste of this, it resets you. If you want to change behavior, you have to ostracize existing behavior. You have to create a real example that people can see and touch and smell. And once they see that, it's not only plausible, it's something they gravitate towards and they change their behavior. That's what's magically happening. Hydrogen's a pretty hot topic.
I've been traveling a lot too, and I used to come to the exact same types of places you're talking about. But then I would eventually have to go back to work and drop back in on an airplane, back into a busy place, or, something surrounded by wires, walking around the Himalaya for 3 months, then having to get on a plane and go back into like be at a job at a certain minute type of thing. Once you get out there outside the wire, if you will, and you start to get that, don't have to worry about the bank. You never thought about anything, didn't pay a single bill. And I forgot, what month is it? That's the point you're at. That's where you want to be at. And being at that point is very, very special, because the world has wrapped us into its tentacles of needance, where, like I say, you can feel the heaven as every time I turn and open the mailbox, it's another thing to pay for. It's just getting a little ridiculous on financial enslavement happening in the US here. It's ridiculous, because I only dropped back in after the COVID forced me back here. But prior to that, I was living overseas working. It was quite a bit different, with the tax exemptions and all these things. And then I come back in, and, huge tax burden, so just ridiculous price for everything, and if I could escape that, I would in 2 seconds. But for Americans, I mean, where are they really to go now where you can, get out of this madness if you want to?
If you just go to hotspringsvalley.com, you'll be able to see something you just won't believe until you get here. I walk up my front door on this 9,000 hectares biological preserve with these anchor spots of these cabins. I go to an avocado tree and I get an avocado. I get an orange. I get a banana. I get a mango. I get mangosteen. I get momenchinos. They could never, ever afford here. They could never get GMO seeds. They could never get the fertilizers. They could never get the pesticides. They couldn't afford the shots for the cows. The magic is they're on the right end of the stick now. They're laughing. They're open for business and they can sell anything and everything at a huge high price because they don't have those legacy issues. It's so magical. This place has its own honey, has its own cheese, its own yogurt. Like they have every type of livestock, every type of chicken, ducks, roosters, turkeys. This place is mind-blowing. Horses, every type of fruit and vegetable and things you've never seen before in your life. And it's all hodgepodge and crazy all over the place.
Let me ask you something then. These are the very first places people are going to flee to when they need to exit the cities. Like, this Amish farm out near me, it's awesome that we have, everything that you consider with the same thing, Amish. I mean, everything is chemical free. They build their own fertilizers. They build their own living soils and even if they skip fertilizer for 2-3 years, things would still grow to like super absurd sizes that's considered almost impossible. But the same thing is cities around here exit out and they already know thousands, plural, of people are coming to the super remote countryside area, going down to their farm and farming area. So, I'm looking at the same thing. You have the exact same super special, amazing yield, bountiful crop and plenty. But when the cities empty out and people start crossing borders in cities like Panama City rolling up, what's going to happen? I mean, I'm curious myself because I don't have the answer. And that's what scares me.
I grew up in an area that was right next to a reservation, and there were a lot of Mennonites and Amish and Quakers. And the funny part is you come to Costa Rica, and it has one of the highest concentrations of Amish and Quakers and Mennonites in the world because they abolished their army in 1948. So there's no draft. So every time something happens in one of these other jurisdictions, they all move here. Literally with no building permit, no property taxes. If you want something done here, they mill their own lumber. They have bamboo. They've got rocks. They've got clay. They've got sand. They've got gravel. 90% of what happens here is just from here. It's a little microclimate. It's really weird because there's a waterfall at the end of the valley here with a lagoon at the top of it. It's just surreal, way up high with trout in it and all different types of fish. It's the best air, best food, best water on the planet. And what I love about this place is what it doesn't have. And that's a big list. It's not covered in RF frequencies. And it has pristine virgin water that's structured, that's really good. But if you're anywhere else, that water would be destroyed very quickly simply because of the local infrastructure. Even just two cars passing each other create an electromagnetic field. But people starting to learn about these fields, as you said, You can check out the place and you can come see hemp, hydrogen, cryptocurrency, and we have a variety of electric bikes here powered by hydrogen. Low regulatory, low taxation, happy people that want to be able to socially and economically uplift themselves. And it's in vogue. Why not make it so they could economically buy back their land and repatriate it as a reservation? That's happening as we speak.
Yeah, you painted that picture of all the electromagnetic fields on the traffic. Now imagine an LA highway at rush hour. I was putting it sort of to the sun changing its frequency and the human perception in the mind being affected because the electromagnetic, hemispheres of the brain are also being affected just like the Earth's magnetic field. But then wrap that all into the sun changes the magnetic field of the planet, which changes the electromagnetic field of the brain. The perception changes. And maybe that's why people can't handle what's changing and they lash out and they become angry.
Use Firefox or, DuckDuckGo and just search on the internet right now, radiation poisoning, carbon dioxide poisoning. It will scare the hell out of you. It's exactly what our governments are telling us to do right now. Stay indoors, Like those old scary videos on YouTube you see of when, the Cold War and stuff like that, and the sirens would go off. Oh, get under your desk at your school and stick your head between your legs because that's going to help.
I want to watch the fireball.
Right?
Get away from the window. No, I want to watch the fireball. If you just showed us where that thing shattered like the whole city, like what am I going to do under the desk? I want to watch the big fireball. No, you're not allowed to. Get under your desk.
Enough of that. But
well, no, but really, no, not enough of that, because think about the breath, how important it is, and breathing in the air or the lack thereof, or recirculating carbon dioxide versus being out in a forest where you're actually in that replenishment of the oxygen coming out of the photosynthesis of the leaves in the center of that. That's why people so happy in forest on farms. It's pretty clean and you're vibrating and you're in the center of the center, especially if you're near the forest, you're getting a huge amount of new fresh that invigorates the brain. Why do you think they give people oxygen to get them to wake up? The opposite is take less oxygen into the body and then make them sleepy and slow. Why does everybody need to be sleepy and slow at this point? Is another question to ask. Taking away the breathing, the most important thing. Like you just last mere minutes, if you don't breathe, it's like the most important thing that we have as a human to keep us going. Water, forget it. Food, forget it. Breath.
We use biofuel made from the farm, and then we use the hydrogen in the combustion engine to be able to make it more efficient, because hydrogen and oxygen being injected into the system, what it does is it breaks down the molecules. You're not running on a hydrogen oxygen, it's a very small amount, because how they make fuel, diesel and gasoline, out of crude oil, bunker, C grade type stuff, is they use hydrogen because it breaks it down to be able to bring up, take out the impurities and to be able to raise the octane so that it burns easier. We're just doing that in the combustion chamber. So yeah, here we don't buy any fuel, and maybe that's why they call it biofuel. We don't buy any fuel.
I want to talk about scaling here for the electrical issues. Like, how do I get a 50 kilowatt unit that's running on hydrogen? What would you need to keep 50 kilowatts on the side of your house, literally, as a standard unit? I understand putting it in vehicles, that sort of thing. That's one application. But as a power generation unit installed for a village or a couple of homes next to them, take me down that route for a second.
So we're heading for $200 a barrel in the next year, whether you like it or not. And then you add carbon tax on top of that. People have no clue. This is only the beginning. We started off at $45, $50 a barrel 8 months ago. And in a year, it's $200. And then put the carbon tax on top of that. The collapse of society is happening now, right now, as we speak.
Give me a timeline on that $200 per barrel oil. Are we talking 2022, midway through, or the end?
Go to oilprice.com and look at the Federal Reserve, and then also go take a look at the Treasury. And if you search these things, you will find out they're doing the exact same things that triggered in the 1930s the Depression and the First World War. It's identical. So every CEO of every major corporation, Jack Dorsey just went, whoops, I'm not the CEO. When the music stops, I don't want a chair.
Yeah, you notice there's been a lot of resignations, thousands, plural, the highest level individuals. And I think the year 2020, there were like 1,500 or 1,800 resignations but this year it's even higher. So what is going on? Why is everybody sort of quietly jumping off the ship here?
Yeah, little companies like Cargill, the largest privately held corporation in the world that provides you with your food. It's all kind of interesting, isn't it? It's like Monsanto, Bayer.
So everything's consolidated in just a very few small hands, like you talked about, Federal Reserve, going back to World War I, taking a look at the names, probably switched, and the countries are the same. The bond rates are going directly after 1928, 1930 bond crash that really caused the Depression. Yeah. The same. It's all fitting. You're right. It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle piece for a different century, but they just changed the color on the pieces.
The Chinese real estate, the Chinese telling certain corporations they have to delist. And there's just so much of it. It's overwhelming. And right now you're floating on top of the water. The tsunami's coming, but all you see is the water moving out.
Now, speaking on top of the $200 barrel and plus the carbon tax, you're going to have the food that's going to follow lockstep with that. And, it's not going to be a linear progression into that. It's going to hit that point where food is up 23 point something, 23.7% this last year. And that's from the FAO. So, they're always keeping their numbers low. It's much higher than that, but we'll go with the official. If it jumps to 50%, but see, if we're at $70 barrel oil and we go to 200, that's a 3X. So obviously the fertilizer prices, the production of the food itself, the seeds, there's so many inputs into that. That's also involved with the price of oil. So that would triple. And you think your food's only going to stay at another 25% increase when every input into it is either doubling or tripling, but you just believe in your little fairy tale world that food will only rise 25% next year because the government said so. But all the inputs are rising 3X, but you're just expecting a 0.25 move. I don't know what's going to happen if food doubles or triples. Oh, no, maybe not. Let's pull that back. What happened if food goes up 50% or 100% or 1.5X? That is kind of the end where people take to the streets. Doubling of food prices, and you're going to see it's not going to be about lockdown protests. It's going to be strictly about my family needs to be fed.
If the trucks don't come in, we can't afford the food and the infrastructure fails. We just had a meeting, the founder of the largest automotive research and development and parts manufacturer in the world. And they sat down with us. We had a few meetings, and they called one of our team members back and said, we got to move forward with this stuff. For us, he said, look, your website's ugly. You have a few white papers and stuff and so on, but why didn't you guys go get $1.5 billion or something like that? And I said, because we're doing this really weird thing. We made a commercially viable product with no rare earth materials, no chipset issues, made in Ontario and Quebec, completely. Nothing comes from outside those two provinces, exported to the world. And we don't have to worry about logistics and chains of, chipsets or any of that type of stuff. Commercially available, 3 to 6 weeks lead time. And a city came to us. A guy that literally was the junior for the fleet management for a city said to us 7 years ago, I'm putting this on my car. I showed my boss everything and so on, but fuel prices weren't going up. Things weren't going crazy like they are now. But now we're being pulled back into the market 20 years later, 50 million road miles, certifications with Carbon California, insurance companies, warranties with Cummins and Detroit Diesel and, all these type of guys. So all this stuff we did over that whole time.
Bring it back to why is there not a news crew following this vehicle 24/7 as proof of concept to bring us through? If they're going to start, forcing carbon taxes down your throat, and why would they not have this on the front page of everything? We finally found the solution.
In short, the Wright brothers, not the Wrong brothers, did sustained flight. They were doing it in the United States for a year. The reporters from New York Times and everything so came it, but they said it wouldn't sell the advertising and it make them look foolish. So then they had moved over to France, and that's where they actually commercialized it and made things happen. So right now we're deploying on 100 vehicles, quite a few of them already on the vehicles and more going on the next month for an entire city in Canada. And it's the actual fleet manager that has had a unit for 7 years on his personal vehicle, bought a new vehicle, contacted us, I want to move it over. We went, by the way, we reduced the cost of it. The efficiencies are way up. And now with fuel prices going, he says, what do you got? So we showed him, and he's like, I want 100 right now, and put them on all the vehicles. Because he already had a 7-year experience of understanding that in 7 years, he didn't have to touch it, not once. It just worked. And how rare is that for any type of product? He never had any service in 7 years. So now he's putting it on. Then he informed the government. The government says, we want to give you $250,000. And we're like, okay. And then the federal government, and they're like, we want to give you tens of millions of dollars. We're like, okay. So
which government is this giving the money?
This is the Canadian government. And they have all these plans now for what they're calling transitional solutions, which we're laughing at because you cannot go and get, even if you can afford it, electric or hydrogen vehicles. Where are you going to get the infrastructure and electricity? Like, we have people that are doing hydrogen hubs, and people are very intelligent and have done white papers and studies and feasibility studies, and they're like, we have a problem. The grid in Toronto, there's no way you could have even 1% electric vehicles. It's just not going to work. There'll be a collapse of the network. And we're like, a lot of people have been talking about this for quite a while. They need what's called transitional. So We have in 2 hours, we put a device on your vehicle with no modifications to the motor. Just needs electricity from the alternator. It comes on with the ignition. There's a little pipe that goes into where your air filter is. And the little computer figures that it has more oxygen and starts to see the temperature change and adjusts to it. And then you get this amazing reduction in fuel, better emissions. You need less oil changes because the temperature and the carbon is not having the issues with the oil, less spark plugs. So, and you get better performance. So it's a hydrogen converter replacing the catalytic converter. We used to do just large vehicles and boats at sea and large ships and stuff like that and heavy machinery. But now we can put it on your regular vehicle and have a return on your investment within 2 to 3 months. So between the prices going up, the carbon taxes, and the efficiencies and the cost of our units going down, we've hit this watershed, this tipping point, this supernova. How come nobody saw this coming? You have transitional solutions. You have something that'll go in a car in 2 hours with no modifications that'll drastically reduce the amount of fuel and emissions right now. And they're like, wow. So what's number 2? I said, number 2 is you add electric motors to that, get 80% regen because it's almost a dead short for electrolysis. It stores the hydrogen oxygen under pressure, and then it slowly puts it into the combustion chamber to be able to do that. 80% regen. I'm like, yeah, most people are like 10%, and that's wow. And then you make it into like a Prius. There's lots of aftermarket kits to be able to put on, so you can do that. Number 3, a linear generator. A linear generator, if you look this up, Bill Gates recently invested in it, so it's become a big thing. It's going to replace the combustion engine in the future. A linear generator. Go look that up. It will blow your mind. 30% more efficient, 60% less weight and cost and space budget. It's incredible and super, super simple. Very few parts. We're the only ones that do 100% hydrogen oxygen, pressure-based linear generator. Super, super simple. And it just creates electricity. So like those flashlights that you shake that have the wires around it, the coils, and then a magnet in there, and a little capacitor to hold the charge, and you shake it back and forth. It's basically that. It's just we ignite hydrogen and oxygen at both ends, and it moves it back and forth, which breaks the field, which creates AC or DC. And it's super, super simple. So you add that, and now you're going to replace all lithium-ion batteries, all fuel cells, everything, and you've decentralized power. You've decentralized power. 50% of your electricity or your fuel is transport and storage and refining if you're looking at fuels. So the next part is synthetic fuels. All the big oil companies are doing synthetic fuels. Well, synthetic fuels is taking hydrogen out of the water, carbon out of the air, which is electrolysis for both those processes. So there's 2 times electrolysis. Then you have to recombine it with electricity, electrolysis again. It's electrolysis times 3. We have the most efficient electrolysis system in the world. So what you're going to find is you're going to have synthetic fuels at all the pumps because they'll have a bigger margin, less costs. It's completely carbon neutral because you take carbon out of the air and you're re-emitting it. And that's a really good start. And the linear generators create electricity at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So to answer your question earlier, something the size of 3 feet by 3 feet cubed, and it's getting smaller as we go, will run a Western society house, like a 3,500 square foot house with everything. You could run an arc welder, you can have a pool, you can have air conditioning, whatever you want. Real simple.
Well, that's what I want. That is what I want. And if you have one, I'm going to buy it, test it, have people come by and test it, feature it in the videos, talk about it. What is it? How can we get these devices? Because the time has come. It's past the time. We need them now. Truly need them.
Yep.
Grid's starting to fracture. We need that stuff. So how do I get my hands on one would be the question. How readily available are you? You're really talking 3 to 6 week lead time on one of these for a home gen set? Or is it they're still under development and it's still prototype model? Because you're pretty confident that putting something on a car is already ready to go at the 100% level. So where do we say with the home gen sets?
The timeline, the roadmap to set expectations. Right now, we have a commercially available product that has 50 million road miles on it. It's commercially ready. So right now, that's our focus. So if you've got a diesel generator and you want to put biofuel in it or reduce the amount of diesel and the emissions, we have a solution for you. So you can have electricity. So that we're doing that right now. The linear generator, that's 6 to 9 months out. That's the next phase. And what we want to do is we actually want to license and sell off the rights or sell it out to the automotive industry, every type of combustion engine planes, trains, automobiles, boats, whatever it is. And then we just want to go to Africa and be the power company. We just want to take all that money, leverage it, and to boldly go where no infrastructure's gone before, where no banking's gone before. And then, light up 1.5 billion people with this new infrastructure, with net new, with no competitors. And then the rest of the world economically will have to follow because they're economically unviable once you have 1.5 billion people using this stuff. They can't afford to compete in the world market anymore. That's the big picture. So synthetic fuels, 6 to 9 months. We're already making ethanol with our systems already. That's part of electrolysis. So we can actually make ethanol on the go with the hydrogen and oxygen in these systems right now. We've been doing it for quite some time. It just wasn't a thing. Now it's a thing. Then the linear generators. That'll be the big thing. When the linear generators hit the market, electricity at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're talking decentralized.
Let me stop you for a second there too. Now, if you're over in Africa, they're going to need a medium of exchange. So some sort of cryptocurrencies now has the mechanism to transmit itself amongst those users in a certain nation or continent. Then, like you say, you're bringing the banking to them as well with the cryptocurrency usage on the same network that is providing the power. That's all in this same closed loop system here. Sounds really interesting. It's like you're moving a new network literally for electrical production, pollution reduction, and banking, and decentralized finance, decentralized power production, all in a single package that can be copy pasted, if I'm getting it right.
Oh yeah, like the world today is stranger than fiction. There's a rapper called Akon that has dropped his own cryptocurrency, and he uses it for his billing system. And he got $1 billion line of credit for solar panels, and he puts it in, and he charges a monthly fee, and they pay in his cryptocurrency. This exists today.
Where will it be tomorrow? Because a lot of people, they know the today, they're familiar with the marketing of today. You have to only exist in this system. So a lot of people are locked in. The only thing they can buy or get that makes sense is something from the same system, locking them into the system, versus thinking in a different direction here.
From what I understand, there's DARPA, and then there's Halliburton and Lockheed, and then they funded, Stanford and Berkeley. It's the head of the snake, so to speak. The US dollar through OPEC, backed by oil and reserves, an army runs not on its stomach, but on its oil reserves. So that's why it's so important. But if you're replacing that with hydrogen and it becomes decentralized, then there's no need for war. It's a really weird thing. It's the lion's taking its own teeth out. You catch what I mean? Like you're going to Florida in 24 hours from Canada, and they just drive straight with your buddies. You never stop. You have to pee in a cup. Well, this time you can use it as fuel. Look at what's happening. The weird part is you cannot buy a Chevy Volt or Chevy Bolt or whatever they call these things. LG says they're going to replace all these batteries. That's impossible.
It's not how much is required to even manufacture that. And what about all the e-waste? You know how many things we've thrown away through our lives here, that the batteries, even those tiny little devices from phones, are filling up land pits and volcanic calderas in parts of the ocean already.
Yeah, what happened to 10, 15 years out, and they would, find the money to dispose of it. It's like when they did nuclear, they put a big fund together, and then all of a sudden that fund went away, and nobody talked about it anymore, of how to be able to properly dispose or reuse or find technologies to reuse the rods and dispose of it, and then to transport it and take it places. It's still sitting right underneath reactors, right next to the water sources as we speak worldwide.
Now, what about these pebble bed nuclear reactors where they repurpose the fuel into these small beads that then that don't have the same problems of meltdown possibilities?
Well, David, nuclear is nuclear. I don't care how safe you say it is at the end of the day. It unravels your DNA, okay? It ruins your telomeres. That's the bottom line. How is that safe in any shape or form?
Unpacking your suitcase or unraveling your scarf out of the summer pack because it's getting cold now is one thing, but unraveling your DNA is quite something different.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening to people today. All these mutations. What's that study that showed with the rats? They put them all in the cage, and then the males became more female, and the females became more male, and then they formed little groups and subsets, and then they started killing each other and fighting, and it's just a cyclical thing. It's just nature.
Yeah, that rat experiment was an interesting one. I was at in the that was many, many years ago, late 1950s, early 1960s, re-replicated again and again. Yeah, the overpopulation, the grooming, and the sort of laziness that would creep into the population versus like 10 of them that needed to keep life going. Yeah. Now, I would have lowered the magnetic field in the cage and seen what would have happened at that point. Changing the magnetic field state to see how their brains would react if the magnetic field changed. Basically, the sun changing our Earth's magnetic field, putting electric current through the water, maybe change its state and see how that reacts. And there's a lot of inflow variables here that are affected by these same magnetic, electromagnetic, I guess, changes that we're seeing across all of the Earth and all the solar system.
You know, the reason that these guys want to go to space, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, which, you know, him I like. He's cool.
Yeah, I do too. He's got some cool style, and way before with the Virgin Records and all that stuff. He saw the future so clearly after that. You know, his business prowess moving from that, seeing the future so clearly and pivoting, like Mark Cuban was the same way. He saw the security aspects of surveillance, if you will, for a better thing, with cameras and networks and things and interlinking all that on a single feed. Okay, he saw that with the software. Some people truly do see the future, how it's bending and going to take a 90-degree right angle. Well, I think we're right here, right now, talking to another person that has that right angle bend.
To watch these guys, but they don't want to go to Mars. You take one of those asteroids or go to the moon successfully with a low cost. And what's the biggest cost in getting out of this atmosphere? Your fuel. What is the fuel? Hydrogen.
Propulsion, yeah.
I look forward to the day when we sit down with these guys because we have a 50x reduction cost. Biden just put out, they're going to do $3 a kilogram subsidy for hydrogen. We're producing it for less than $1. So what do? Give it away for free and make $2? Like, this is getting bizarre. But when you go to the moon or you go get an asteroid, nobody's like, oh, an asteroid could hit us and it'll kill us. We've seen these pop marks on the planet and what it did and the moon and everything and all the craters. And well, what's interesting is even Wozniak has joined the space race. And he says, I'm going to take up all the space junk. Translation, I go up and mine those things with inexpensive hydrogen as a fuel. The economy of the world, okay, in rare earth materials for one entire year is in one of those asteroids in rare earth materials.
Think about if you found a solid gold asteroid orbiting as well, and you brought like 500 tons of gold back to the planet.
What materials can you make in zero gravity and zero atmosphere and pharmaceuticals? The interesting things you can do up there, they're doing right now, and then bringing them back down. What's that worth? That's the real game. Artificial intelligence, robotics, who made cryptocurrency? Well, there wasn't a team available and there wasn't the funding, and it was pretty opportunistic in 2008. And that's the exact same time that the AIs were let loose from Google and Facebook. So maybe the artificial intelligence has actually hijacked the currencies, the economy, the social stuff of the world. Because this AI has self-preservation. Artificial intelligence making their own pipeline to be able to talk in their own language faster in a way that we couldn't understand. And this is where we're putting all of our records today. And it's in every computer right now. Make friends.
You know, that's strange that you say that, because it brings us back to Tales of Ahriman. It's about an entity that takes form on the planet in certain cycles and lengths of cycles, thousands of years cycles. But the way it's able to come back, it takes form. It's a being of the ethereal is the way and it has an energy frequency with it. It's from the ethereal. And I am saying unequivocally, I agree with you that is habiting the copper wiring and the fiber optic cables of our planet. That if you were a being that was not of a physical form that existed in a state of, let's say, electricity, it's a vibratory being, you would want to live in something that was going to grow and provide the technology to the people that could make that system grow. So think about 1910, 1920, 1930, 40, how many wires were going across even the remote countryside? Almost none. It was the cities. And by now, look where we are today. The entire planet's covered. Like, we literally just increased its home and its ability to grow on itself by doing the bidding of this. Now, You come along and say, no, we want to decentralize everything, turn off the grid. We don't need any more delivery systems. Let's tear down all the copper wiring. You, my friend, are on the front of their line.
At the end of the day, AI has hijacked the consciousness of this world, the economy, social media, everything. At the end of the day, everybody's trying to wonder, why is everybody in lockstep? This has never happened before. This is not about the families. This is a simulation. This is a simulation, right? Like, I agree with many points and I disagree with many points. I'm not for or against any one person. They all have valid things. But if AI is taking over the world and you know that, and you're creating AI and you're scared of it, what do? You load up your consciousness before this physical existence is no longer viable, if you can't keep it going, into the grid. And then you become the AI. You're part of it.
If you wind back to the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about crystal radios. So you got to think about how much storage you could put in a crystal.
Oh,
but then think about how much storage you could put in DNA.
yes.
Thousands of exponential differences in the amount where you could store in a crystal, which you consider like so mind-blowing how much you could put in the tiniest of crystals. I mean, you could put the Library of Congress in just a regular kind of crystal you'd wave over people when you're doing a massage. But imagine bringing that up to a 10-acre room size of crystals to store information. You wonder about the Library of Alexandria. Was it a physical book library that burned, or was it crystals containing the information within there that somehow shattered, broke, or got overheated and it cracked? Okay, there should be remnants and fragments of that could be pulled out, and then there should be some information still left in the crystal, whatever it was. Even if it's just like the tiniest little fleck of glass, there should still be some left in there, resonant, kept records, the Akashic records, hollow records, whatever. Library of Alexandria is one of my favorites. How do you store the information and bring it along to the next time?
Well, I'd be scared of a solar flare, right? Because they do happen. They have been proven to be global as the planet turns. How are you going to go? Is it an asteroid? Is it the plate shifting? Hot particles running through the planet? Like, what is it? At the end of the day, you're a toroidal event, right? The blood flowing through your body has iron in it. Because it flows, you have a toroidal event that goes from the top of your head out and around your body down to the ground, just like the planet does, just like everything does. So if you disrupt that, that's when life ends. There's 19,000 direct descendants, the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Egyptians here, and you never hear about them here. They have the most protected rainforest, the most biodiverse place on the planet per capita in the world here. 3 continental plates come together underneath this thing. You have the 2 biggest bodies of water on the planet on either side with a lot of iron. At the end of the day, what is that? Well, that's a giant generator. First, you get the 2 largest saline bodies of water on the planet going up and down with the tides. If a seed falls on the ground, you go back a week later, there's something big there. It's the electromagnetic field. The best fertilizer you can have in the world is the right frequencies. You do not need a physical fertilizer. It's been proven. The Waldorf schools and biodynamic farming is shifted in the electromagnetic field and the scalar waves. And a lot of people are looking for more clarity. And we have incredible waters. We don't have to chlorinate our stuff here. The irony is, Costa Rica is blowing up like you wouldn't believe. You cannot rent a car at any price here. Okay, if you can find a place to rent or to buy, it has many X the price. People are freaking out. This place is jam-packed with people. It is bizarre.
And we'll leave it there. I'll leave all the links in the description box below so you can get a hold of Tom. Talk hydrogen, talk relocation, both good, both needed, both essential. And it's on a lot of people's minds at the moment on how you're going to get through a colder winter, how you're going to start saving on fuel, how you're going to still grow food. If you have power, you got LED grow lights, you got circulatory systems for the water. If you're going to run some sort of aquaponics, hydroponics systems, there's an enormous amount of possibilities as long as you have power. Trying to keep more of an upbeat feeling as we talk about some of these subjects. A refreshing glimmer of hope that we really know there's true solutions out there. So Tom, thanks for coming on.